Now, David Hume wrote at a time when, you go back and you read some of these old philosophy books like Hume, like Kant, and I kind of wish, and I know I'm spoiled and I'm probably just a creature of my own era, but I'm spoiled by the fact that, when philosophers today write, they tend to write out their arguments in numbered premises and a conclusion. The classic philosophers really didn't do that. Not so much. They would lots of times just write in paragraph form or something. And so it's kind of left to us to kind of decipher, okay, break down that paragraph into premises and conclusions. Well, David Hume's argument against miracles is one of those situations. And the result has been that there's been some disagreement about exactly how he meant to formulate this. And there's been two versions of his argument, what we might call a hard version and a soft version, that have been presented. The hard version is would be represented by these premises and conclusion I have on the screen. The hard version says this: premise one, a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature. Premise two, we have uniform experience that the laws of nature are never violated. Conclusion, therefore, miracles cannot occur. I wonder if anybody can recognize the problem with that right off the bat. The hard version is not very popular nowadays for very good reason. I mean, even most skeptics will not try to present the hard version of David Hume's argument. And that's because premise two commits a logical fallacy called question begging. Look at what Hume says in premise two. We have uniform experience that the laws of nature are never violated. I could rephrase that to say that we have 100% certainty that miracles never happen. I mean, that's basically what he says. Uniform experience, meaning complete, total experience without exception, that the laws of nature are never violated. That's a miracle, right? He literally just smuggles his conclusion into his second premise. Right? He just states it as if it were already a known fact. Well, what about all those people who claim they have witnessed a miracle? All right. Hume, like I said, Hume just assumes his conclusion there in premise two. That's why that's called question begging. You haven't proven anything. You just stated it, kind of reworded it a little bit as one of the premises of your conclusion, and then turned around and said, look what I proven. What did I prove? Well, no, you didn't prove it. You assumed it earlier on. Another point that I mentioned earlier that I said we come back to is a problem there with premise one. Premise one says a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature. And you'll notice the definition I gave you talked about it being an exception to the natural order of things. When people like to use this terminology, violation of the laws of nature, it raises an interesting question of what do you mean by that? What are the laws of nature? Are the laws of nature what we call descriptive, or are they prescriptive? I will spoil it tell you if you read Hume. Hume ends up describing the laws of nature as descriptive. What that means is the laws themselves don't determine anything. They're just descriptions of what happens. All right. So the law of it's not the law of gravity does not make things fall the way they fall. It's just us coming up with a description of what actually happens. We see something, it falls in a certain way, and we describe how it fell. And that's all the law of nature is. It's just a description. Whereas prescription, when we say the laws are prescriptive, we're saying they actually do govern. So it's the law of gravity makes something fall the way it falls. The reason that's important is because Hume defines the laws of nature as descriptive, just descriptions. And isn't that convenient? Because that allows him to just literally, through the stroke of his pen, explain away any miracles. Because what would happen if the laws are nothing but descriptions of what happens? Then what would happen if someone did rise from the dead? Well, we just write another law to describe it. We just describe it, right? And the mere fact that we're describing it means it is natural. It's just a new law of nature that maybe we didn't know before, but now we describe it happening, and therefore we just add this new law of nature to our group of natural laws, to our group of descriptions. And so literally nothing can ever be a violation of the law of nature, because the moment you see something you think might be a violation, you just create a new law of nature to bring it under the umbrella of the laws of nature. I mean, that's what Hume does. And so that's another problem with his argument, and really not just the hard form of the argument. All right. Whereas the Christian understanding is the laws are prescriptive. What we say there is, look, no, God created this universe. And at the time he created this universe, he imposed certain laws upon it that would govern the way it operates, just like a machine, right? You have certain gears and pulleys that govern how a machine is going to work. That's what the laws of nature do. God put these laws in place to determine how the universe was going to operate. Not how people operate. People are something different. We are not part of the mechanics of the universe. Again, that's a conversation for another day. But the universe itself is governed by these prescriptive laws. All right, so that's the problem with the hard version of his argument. This is the soft version of the argument. This is the one that's really more popular today. People try to basically give Hume the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, he wasn't advocating, he wasn't question begging, he wasn't literally putting his conclusion into his second premise. He was saying something more like this. He was saying a miracle is, by definition, a rare occurrence. Check. We agree with him so far, right? Absolutely. I just said that, right? That a miracle can't be happening every 2 seconds. Otherwise, the exception becomes the norm, and now there's no way to recognize an exception. Premise number 2, natural law is, by definition, a description of regular occurrences. And this is where you start to see his terminology about a description. No, we don't agree it's a description of regular occurrences. It is a prescription that defines the regular occurrences, that mandates the regular occurrences. But we see where he's going here. Premise 3, the evidence for the regular is always greater than the evidence for the rare. Premise 4, a wise man always bases his belief on the greater evidence. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Conclusion, therefore, a wise man should never believe in miracles. Again, I was interrupting a lot, so I'm going to read that again straight through. Premise 1, a miracle is by definition a rare occurrence. Premise 2, natural law is by definition a description of regular occurrences. Premise 3, the evidence for the regular is always greater than the evidence for the rare. Premise 4, a wise man always bases his belief on the greater evidence. Conclusion, therefore, a wise man should never believe in miracles. What's the problem with the argument? Well, I already kind of hinted at one, which I won't go into too much, and that's, you see where he smuggles in the difference between natural law being descriptive versus prescriptive. But here's the big one, all right? Hume commits a logical fallacy called equivocation, all right? Equivocation is a big, fancy philosophical term that just means you changed the definition of one of your terms, one of your words, in the middle of your argument, all right? It's subtle, it's sometimes hard to recognize, but let's take a look at how he did this. Look at premise 3. The evidence for the regular is always greater than the evidence for the rare. All right. What does that mean? Well, that means that, if you have a regular occurrence that happens a bazillion times and a rare occurrence that happens 2 times, and you were to add up, all right, how many instances of the regular do I have versus how many instances of the rare do I have? Well, I'm always going to have more instances of the regular, more observations of the regular than I'm ever going to have of observations of the rare, correct? So in this situation, in this premise, when he uses that word greater, he's speaking of quantity of evidence. The quantity of evidence. You will always have more instances of evidence of the regular than you will have instances of evidence of the rare. By nature of what those are. The regular is what's happening more often, right? Now look at what he does in premise 4 and the subtle shift he makes. A wise man always bases his belief on the greater evidence. Does greater in that premise mean quantity? Is it true that a wise man always bases his belief on whatever evidence he has more instances of? No. What Hume has done here is he has shifted the meaning of the term greater from referring to quantity to referring to quality, how good the evidence is, how strong the evidence is, the high quality of evidence. A wise man certainly does always base his belief on the greater quality evidence, the more persuasive evidence. But that does not necessarily mean that the wise man always bases his belief on the greater number of instances of evidence. I'll give you one very clear example that should clear this up very obviously, and that's the lottery, all right? Let's say that you have a winning lottery ticket. Well, let's follow Hume's reasoning here, okay? What is more regular? What is more common? Having a losing lottery ticket or having a winning lottery ticket? I mean, obviously, the nature of the lottery is that it is far more common, it is more regular to have a losing lottery ticket than it is to have a winning lottery ticket. And so, if we were to use the term greater, which one of those two propositions, you have a winning ticket, you have a losing ticket, which of those two propositions has the greater evidence for it when we use the term greater, meaning quantity? It would be that you have a losing ticket, right? Well, that means then, if we are consistent, we just use greater to mean quantity, that we should never believe that anyone ever has a winning lottery ticket. Because every single time someone claims to have a winning lottery ticket, there will always be far more instances of losing tickets than there will winning tickets. So following Hume's reasoning, we should never believe that they have a winning ticket. With that example in mind, is it true, is premise 4 true, that a wise man always bases his belief on the greater quantity, greater numerical amount of evidence? No, it is not true. A wise man always bases his belief on the greater quality of evidence. Quality can outweigh quantity. Using our lottery example, what would that mean? Well, number one, you got a ticket with the winning numbers on it. All right? You literally show a ticket. Look, here's the winning numbers. Here's the ticket. All right? That would be one instance where we can actually say, no, that's going to be the quality of that evidence than anything that we would get to from just even though it's overwhelmed in quantity by losing tickets. Also, other things we can do today. I mean, they can track, how often you hear about a winning lottery and it tells you 2 seconds later what store it was bought from, right? I mean, they have these machines now, so they can actually tell whether the ticket you're presenting to them was actually, a genuine ticket or not. Was it purchased through this machine at this location? Heck, they can even pull out surveillance footage and see if they can find you there buying the actual ticket. So there's a million ways that we can show a higher quality of evidence that can outweigh even the unlikely quantity unlikeliness if we were just examine based on quantity. So that's where Hume's argument really goes wrong. The sought version messes up quality of evidence for quantity, changes the definition of the meaning of the term greater mid-flow.